Welcome to Kitchen Sink Dharma, and I want to start off by talking a little bit about impermanence, because when I started writing this talk, my knee was a bit sore, and it had been like that for a week or so. And I'd been planning a walking holiday in a couple of weeks, so I was really wondering whether it was going to be a problem. I didn't know if it was going to be something or nothing. But that pain in my knee wasn't the only thing that happened that day. All sorts of other things happened. I had breakfast with an old friend. I spent time with my grandchildren. I made some phone calls, I sent some messages. I did countless other things throughout the day, and the whole experience of living, of being alive, just kept changing constantly, just from moment to moment. And there were times when I felt uncertain. There was uncertainty I couldn't resolve. But there were also moments of peace. There were moments of connection, moments of laughter, moments of frustration, and so on. And it was really easy to see how everything is just changing all the time. Everything is impermanent. So I'm not talking about change on a large scale. I mean, throughout the day, our experience shifts and it changes. In fact, it changes moment to moment. Our thoughts just come and go. They arise and disappear. All of our moods, our obsessions, our fears. Every single moment flows into the next one. And if we truly understand this, we flow with it. We just run with it. And this helps us to move towards a place where we start to identify a bit less with our experience. We take it a bit less personally. And some of our suffering starts to fall away. And you can sense this in the body. You know, if we really tune into our senses, we might start to notice the flow of energy, the fact that pain isn't fixed, it rises and falls. And things like tightness and warmth and cold are always shifting and changing within the body. And the subtle feelings that go on all the time that we hardly notice. So when we meditate with our attention on the body, we have the opportunity to practice equanimity as sensations arise and change and pass away. And by doing that, by practicing equanimity, we're developing a skill, which is the ability to flow with our experience. Now, most people have some understanding of impermanence. You know, of course, we know that everything changes. But I think we don't realize, or at least sometimes we forget, just how fundamental that is as our experience, you know, especially in relation to our bodies. And the writer Ian McGilchrist writes about how most of us, including many scientists, just mistakenly think of organisms as just simply being machines. And he writes, "We now live in a world in which everything, including the human brain, is considered to be understandable in the same way that we understand a pop-up toaster." And this machine analogy is often used to describe the body, and it just isn't accurate. So, for example, he points out that you can switch off a toaster, you can switch off a car or a computer or any machine. You can leave it overnight and then switch it on again. And as humans, we're absolutely nothing like that. We depend on the continuous exchange of matter that we call metabolism, just to stay alive. And if all the millions of complex reactions that are going on in the cells were to stop, even just for a moment, we wouldn't survive. And it's the constant flow of matter and energy that gives us life. So we're much more like a river or a stream than a toaster. And each one of us is made up of trillions of cells, and every single one of those cells performs many millions of complex reactions every second. So our bodies are constantly changing, and new cells are born and old ones die. And the cells in your body now aren't the same ones that existed in your body a few years ago. And McGilchrist describes living organisms as being characterized by this constant change on an unimaginable scale. And we don't have a choice about that. We need those millions of metabolic reactions to happen. Just as the existence of a river depends on the water molecules flowing through it. You know, if the water stopped flowing and replacing itself, the river would no longer be a river. So a stream or a river has an appearance of stability. There's a certain consistency in the way that it looks to us. But it's not the same body of water, not even for a second. So for example, we refer to the River Tyne, and we have a shared understanding of what that means. But the River Tyne isn't simply a thing made up of the sum of its constituents, because these constituents are constantly changing. It's more like a process. It's a flow of matter and energy. And that's exactly what we are. That's what we are. We think we can trace a river back to its source, but that isn't even really its source. So you can trace it further back into the soggy hills and the rain and the clouds and so on. And at the other end, even though we stop calling it a river when it reaches the sea, it doesn't stop there. There's no clear line where the river ends. It just flows into the sea and it keeps flowing. And there's fresh water mixing with salt water. And we're so much more like a river than something like a toaster. Our miraculously complicated bodies just flow and change every second. And we're not in any way solid. And the matter and energy that flow through us have got no beginning. And they've got no end. So the conditions that led to our existence, they can be traced back to way, way before the day we were born. And the influences and the effects that we have on the world are going to continue long after the day we die. So we construct a sense of identity, but really we're just process. All we have to go on in this world is our experience, and that keeps changing. And our external world keeps changing. And the inner world of feelings and emotions and thoughts is constantly changing. It's always churning and changing. And our sensations and our bodily reactions, all the thoughts that arise one after the other throughout the day, all the feelings that feel nice or nasty or pleasant or unpleasant, it's all changing. And the whole nature of impermanence is that there's no up without down. And we live in this roller coaster of fear and hope and comfort and discomfort and happiness and sadness. And this is what we call dukkha in Buddhist teachings. Dukkha being the word that's often translated as suffering. But it's not necessarily suffering as we think of it. It can be very mild suffering, it can be just the sense of not feeling very satisfied. The sense of just something not being quite right. And we can try and disconnect from that sense of dukkha. We can numb ourselves to it, but it doesn't work. We can go and play mental movies in our heads in which we pretend that we've conquered it, but it doesn't go away. So maybe like me, your life has meant that you've had to accept the reality of impermanence. Maybe you've had no choice. Maybe you've practiced mindfulness of the body, tuning into the whole experience of impermanence directly. And if this has helped you, that's great. It's helped me. And after years of knowing impermanence, knowing this reality and embracing it and inhabiting it, the only thing that makes sense to me is to try and meet my world with some mindfulness, with some patience, with some kindness. Not that I always do, but even just knowing that this is the only thing that makes sense, give me something to work towards. So my practice isn't just about welcoming everything with kindness and presence, it's also about failing. I keep failing and keep coming back. And we can check in with ourselves every so often. We can just ask ourselves, how we're feeling. And if you're uncomfortable in any way, mentally or physically, you can ask the question, can I bear this? Can I practice being with it? Can I practice turning towards it? And you can ask yourself, what does this feel like? Just knowing it's going to pass as quickly as it arose. Everything changes and our experience is changing all the time. And the big question for me is whether you can meet it with friendliness without trying to push it away, whether you can meet it with curiosity, whether you can meet it with awareness. Because a few moments of just feeling it in your body allows it to change. And that's all it takes to build up that resilience, that steadiness. And we need a lot of that resilience right now because the world is unstable. There's some very real worries. If not for us. If not for us, then certainly for people we care about in the wider world. So we have health worries and we have money worries, we have geopolitical worries, and it feels like our world's changing fast and there's realities that we're having to adjust to. And scholars tell us that the Buddha lived and taught in a period of considerable upheaval. His world was changing at every level. And there were these frequent violent conflicts, and he recognized that his world was full of instability and uncertainty and unpredictability. So these are not new to us. But they challenge us, they challenge our sense of self that we've tried so hard to build up. So how we relate to that, how we relate to instability and impermanence really determines how we live. Because it's possible to accept it fully. And when difficult thoughts arise, we can let them in and we can watch them and we can feel them and we can allow them to arise and pass. And in our meditation practice, we're not trying to rise above the raw and the messy. We're not trying to transcend everything. We're not trying to get over our humanness. We're practising opening up to our tenderness, to our vulnerability, to our sensitivity, and to our insubstantial nature. And we're learning to flow like a river, just freely and joyfully. So thanks for joining me this time, and I hope you can join me again soon on Kitchen Sink Dharma.